Welcome to CC Writes. My name is CC Lepke, and today, let's just jump into it. Let's get started. Let's do this. This joke is a lot funnier if you know that I'm about to start talking about Inciting Incident. The keystone of your entire story is the inciting incident. That shouldn't be news to you. I'm sure that you know for a story to happen, something needs to motivate your character to action. Even Homer Simpson gets out of bed every morning with the promise of a donut and the threat of something happening to his family. But on a deeper level, the way that we handle the inciting incident as writers can make the difference between a good and a bad story. The inciting incident sets the tone, pace, and believability of your writing. If you don't get it right, the entire rest of your story will fall flat. For any new writers out there that are unfamiliar with the concept, an inciting incident is an event that occurs in a character's life that sets them on a journey for the duration of the story. It's the literary depiction of cause and effect. At first glance, this concept might seem pretty simple. Something happens to your character, so they start doing interesting things that you write a story about. Genius. Just do that, right? Well, the reality may not be so easy. As I already mentioned, inciting incident affects the tone, pace, and believability. This also means that the inciting incident has to work hand in hand with prose, timing, and suspension of disbelief in order to be effective. Now, I've already gone into a great deal of detail about how to effectively write prose in another series, so I'm not going to touch on that here. You're welcome. If you feel shaky on your prose and want some solid steps to take to help improve it, then go ahead and check it out. It's definitely worth your time. For my purposes here, I'm going to focus primarily on pacing and believability. With these two elements well in hand, you'll be able to craft a solid inciting incident that will hold your story together. We are making literary glue. Don't eat it. Steve, I said no. Please excuse me for bragging, but my latest story, Fine, was praised by a Publisher's Weekly Reviewer at the Book Life Prize for its unhindered pacing. Yes, thank you, I know, I'm fantastic. Well, a skillful storyteller is what they said, but you know. My point is that when it comes to the timing of a story, I know what I'm talking about. Believe me when I say that an inciting incident should have a very specific placement within your book. I break a story down into a 3-act structure. A quarter of the story goes into the first act, half of the story goes into the second act, and the remaining quarter of the story goes into the third act. I know, math, right? Ugh. But it's really helpful, so bear with me. The inciting incident belongs in the first act. In fact, it should occur about 2/3 of the way through your first act, or about 15 to 18% of the way through your story overall. You might think, but Cece, I'm a pantser. I don't plan my stories down to the last word like you do. And that's okay. Write your first draft in whatever way you want. I'm not your mom. I'm not gonna ground you for being a disobedient little punk. But when you work on the edits and rewrites of your story, you need to keep this positioning in mind. Make adjustments after the fact if you need to, but you need to get the inciting incident in the right spot by the time you're done polishing your work. If not, then your pacing and your story will suffer the consequences. Of course, the exact positioning doesn't matter if you don't know what should go before and after the inciting incident. There's a sequence of events that needs to be followed in order to strengthen your pacing as much as possible. Before the inciting incident, you need to show your character living their life as the master of their domain. Sure, they might have struggles and worries that have a huge impact on their lives, but it is a life they know. They're comfortable with their decisions, comfortable with the consequences, and everything goes about how they expect it to go. In this section, you establish their greatest strength, their tragic flaw, and show the thing that the character values the most. For me, it would probably be food. I will bust some heads if you try to mess with my food. CC doesn't share. In the inciting incident, the thing that the character values the most should be ripped away from them. This is where most women in literature get fridged. Please don't do that. You're better than that. So then, after you're done not fridging your female characters, you can move on to the post-inciting incident story element. Some of you might think, oh, I know this one. It's the crossing of the threshold. Well, you're wrong. But that's okay. Most people who teach story structure have a really bad habit of glossing over this section with the mistaken impression that it's implied. The thing that should happen immediately after an inciting incident is denial, and then turmoil while the main character struggles to make a decision about what they should do to move forward. Your character can only cross the threshold into their adventure after they've made a decision to pursue the thing they've lost so that they can make everything go back to the way it was. Let me be perfectly clear on that. Your character wants everything to go back to the way it was. They want safety, they want certainty, and they want nothing to change. And in the end, isn't that what we all want? Yes? No? Maybe that's just me? Great. In Toy Story, the inciting incident happens when Andy gets a new toy. Woody, the main character, first denies the reality of the new change in his life. Through Andy's new playstyle and the adoration that the other toys have for Buzz, Woody is forced to recognize that the changes that have occurred are changes that he can't accept. Once he's processed this change, he comes to the decision that things would go back to the way that they were before if Buzz wasn't around. So Woody makes the decision to push Buzz out of a window. You know, like you do. Once Woody crosses that line, there's no turning back. He has to continue along that journey until he reaches the destination. When you take away the thing that a character most desires, the first instinct of your character is to deny that things are different now. Then, when it becomes obvious that things are, in fact, different, you force them to make a decision. Will they accept the new change to their life and move on without their beloved object while remaining in a place of safety? Or will they pursue the thing they lost into the depths of hell so that they don't have to grow as a person? You need to show the struggle with that decision because they're ultimately leaving the life where they feel the most safe and comfortable. Trauma doesn't usually turn us into hardened, bitter versions of ourselves right away. It takes time and attention. Give that attention to your characters. Be the evil author that you always knew you could be. Now that you have the placement and surrounding events pinned down, we can move on to the suspension of disbelief. A good inciting incident that allows the audience to set aside reality so that they can enjoy the story centers around two very important things: acting and world building. Think about all of the bad actors you've ever disparaged. What are some common complaints you have? Were they wooden, expressionless? Did they read their lines awkwardly? In order to suspend disbelief, the actors in a work need to put in the effort to make their emotions and actions appear true to life. The emotions of your characters need to ring true for your audience. Their actions need to remain in agreement with the situation that they find themselves in. In the inciting incident, this is especially important. You're setting up the logic of the entire story based on this single action and reaction. Let me put it this way. If you had an inciting incident where a small child lost her favorite toy left to her by her deceased grandmother who she's not yet ready to let go of, would it make sense for the child to agree with her father that they can just get another similar toy the next day at Walmart? Or would she throw a tantrum, cry, scream, and beg to get her parents to help her solve the problem? When her parents force her to leave the toy behind, would she go along willingly and politely? Or would she sulk, cry some more, and misbehave? You know, like a child. Your readers aren't going to believe that the little girl happily goes along with her parents. They might believe she's trying to fool them if you put in enough cues to indicate that she's being subversive, and if you distract the parents enough that they wouldn't notice their child's obviously odd behavior. Actions and emotions of not just your character, but the other actors in the scene all need to agree that the things that occur in the inciting incident are real, have real consequences and matter to everyone involved. If the actions in your inciting incident are forced or contrived, it ruins the believability of your entire story. Think about it. If you don't believe a character would act a certain way or that they even care about the inciting incident in the first place, then what's the point of them going on an adventure at all? If Honey Badger don't care, Honey Badger don't go. In the same way, the world that you set up in your inciting incident needs to be real enough to your audience that they feel comfortable engaging in your story. And when I say real, I actually don't mean realistic. I mean structured. A world has to have rules, and it has to abide by its own rules. Those rules can be stupid, but they must be consistent. If you set your story in the real world, you can't introduce the idea of magic or strangeness without first establishing that these things might actually be possible. Don't jump the shark right at the beginning of your tale. Make sure your audience has the opportunity to think, oh, this is a world where magic can happen. This is a world where a billionaire playboy can make a clean energy source that powers a high-tech suit while experiencing a medical emergency inside of a cave. This is a world where the rest of the story is possible. Foreshadowing is a great way to establish the less realistic bits of your story. Just drop in a few key details to give your audience a frame of reference for the thing that's about to occur. In Beowulf, the titular character heard about the monster before it ever attacked his village. So then when the monster finally did attack the village, the audience had no room to think, wait, there are monsters here? If you keep your pacing on track, make sure the actions and reactions of your characters are reasonable, and establish a well-ordered world for your story, then you can create a meaningful inciting incident that will do the heavy lifting for your work. Remember that a good inciting incident can make a great story. If you'd like more in-depth advice than what I provided today about pacing a story, check out the video on top about how to pace a story the easy way. Otherwise, click on the bottom video to see what YouTube recommends. As always, thank you so much for joining me today on CC Writes. I hope you enjoyed our time together, and I will see you later.